You first. When you take a look at both of these QBs, who had the most impressive start so far in the preseason?
Well, to me, it was Shedeur. I didn't see any interceptions when he was out there. Didn't see anything like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think Dillon Gabriel did a bad job. I was impressed with the brother, but I'm going to go with Shedeur. You know, the pressure was on him. The spotlight was on him.
Stephen A. Smith didn't just call out Dillon Gabriel. He held him accountable and made him rethink his comments. The moment Dillon Gabriel spoke and went after Shedeur Sanders, it wasn't a minor slip. He crossed the line and stepped directly into Stephen A. Smith's wheelhouse. And Smith answered with a clear, direct response that left no room for misinterpretation.
The comparisons were emanating from the media more so than anybody else. And that's what I think, that's exactly who I think he was directing his comments towards. Having said that, Dillon Gabriel, respectfully, it was stupid. A very dumb comment to make. First of all, let me tell you something right now. In every walk of life, far beyond the parameters of a football field.
This wasn't casual sports commentary, it was a decisive critique. Dillon Gabriel's comments were taken apart by Stephen A. Smith with clear, direct points. Gabriel, a quarterback with solid stats but limited top-level achievements, chose to take a public shot at Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur, who has handled sustained media scrutiny and on-field expectations, became the target of an unnecessary criticism. Smith responded by challenging Gabriel's standing to make that claim, and by defending Sanders on the facts. The outcome was clear. Gabriel overreached, and Sanders didn't deserve the hit.
Dan Orlovsky would sit up here in comparison to Shedeur Sanders, who did no such thing, and say, hey, thought he looked better. I got to give him the edge here. I thought it wasn't bad. A pick six and a fumble, and we can get over fumbles. Have you heard anybody say that? I know it's possible. Have you ever heard anybody say, we get over?
Stephen A. Smith responded immediately. As soon as Dillon Gabriel made his comments about Shedeur Sanders, Smith delivered a clear, point-by-point critique that drew national attention across the NCAA media cycle. Dillon Gabriel has a reputation as a good quarterback, not a dominant one. He can post strong numbers against opponents like Tulsa, but his performance has been inconsistent when the stakes and competition rise to playoff level.
Well, those who produce get treated differently than those who don't. What he said echoes the mentality of all of America practically, and most certainly the world, as we see things being globalized more and more every day. It was a stupid, idiotic, immature comment, because clearly you were feeling the heat because a lot of people was talking about how Shedeur should be QB.
Dillon Gabriel is a capable quarterback, but not a standout. Even so, he chose to talk down to Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback who has navigated constant scrutiny and pressure and still represents the future of a program that was struggling before he arrived. The comparison was weak. The criticism was unnecessary. Stephen A. Smith recognized that and dismantled Gabriel's argument with a clear, direct response.
How the Browns react to this, how the locker room reacts to this, how Shedeur reacts to this, because it was a clear shot at Shedeur. But let's say Dillon Gabriel's talking about the media. How could you be a brand new quarterback in the NFL and the first time you get behind a mic after your first game, you throw the media under the bus? That's arrogance.
Stephen A. Smith excels in moments like this. When Dillon Gabriel made his remarks about Shedeur Sanders, Smith responded with a focused, direct critique. He questioned Gabriel's standing to make that claim, noting that Gabriel has transferred between programs and has not been a Heisman finalist. Without theatrics, Smith laid out why Gabriel's resume doesn't justify taking public shots at Sanders. Smith's point was clear. Targeting Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback central to his program's future and consistently under intense scrutiny, was misplaced. Gabriel's criticism lacked the substance to support it, and Smith methodically showed why.
Content today on his 42nd I want you to be meaner. Birthday. That's number one. Number two, after the game, the Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski said there was a mix-up in the routes and that players were in the area that they shouldn't have been.
Look at Stephen A's face. Look at Stephen A's face. Look at
Stephen A.
Oh my Lord.
The strength of Stephen A. Smith's response was that he didn't just address Gabriel's remarks. He challenged the image around him. Dillon Gabriel often presents himself as an overlooked contender ready to surprise. But the reality is that his profile hasn't commanded broad attention. It's a clear reminder that not every opinion carries equal weight. In defending Shedeur Sanders, Stephen A. was direct and precise. Shedeur isn't just a quarterback. He is Deion Sanders' son, which subjects him to scrutiny far beyond anything Gabriel has faced. Even under that pressure, Shedeur has maintained his composure, shown confidence, and delivered in key moments that helped revive a program many had written off.
Stupidity, all of it. I thought it was a clear shot at Shedeur due to the fact that his Oregon coach threw a shot at Coach Prime and Shedeur during their meeting at Colorado last year. But you know what? The cream rises to the top. Let's see what happens this week. I see a lot of the media talking about they think it was about the media and not about Shedeur. And I think that's a chess move.
For Dillon Gabriel to take shots at Shedeur Sanders was a miscalculation. Stephen A. Smith made the mismatch clear. Gabriel's attempt to shame Sanders was unnecessary and counterproductive. You don't target Deion Sanders' son when Deion has turned Colorado into primetime television. It underscored that Dillon Gabriel has often played with a chip on his shoulder because the spotlight hasn't followed him. He has been around long enough to compile numbers but not to earn broad respect. That's why going after Shedeur was misguided. Sanders, despite ups and downs, drives headlines. Gabriel's most notable headlines have been his transfers. Stephen A. Smith pressed that point without hesitation, challenging Gabriel's standing and leaving his argument looking like a forced throw that turns into a pick six.
You know what? Still needs to thank me a little bit more for that restaurant I treated him and his family to, because it was big time, and stop embarrassing me by going places and trying to use coupons. That's how pathetic he is. The point is that a pick six and a fumble is usually considered a bad day.
Stephen A. Smith didn't need to raise his voice to make the point. He presented Dillon Gabriel as a player whose talk outpaces his resume and defended Shedeur Sanders with clear comparisons. That's why he called Gabriel out so directly. The comparison wasn't just unfair, it was forced. Now look at Gabriel's record. The numbers are solid and he can win against average defenses, but the resume lacks defining markers. There's no sustained Heisman contention, no late season surge that reshaped the national picture, and no postseason moment that cements a legacy. The track record reflects steady production, not top-tier impact. That's the gap Smith underscored. Gabriel's criticism of Shedeur Sanders wasn't supported by what he has accomplished, while Sanders continues to carry a program under constant scrutiny.
Let's see some of them step up and make some plays out there.
Ain't no way.
Gabriel
Ain't no way. He's not built like that. No way.
And this one is picked off and going back the other way.
Oh my God, why did he stop playing?
Now it's a foot race. And that is that.
They told me bust out my AP, perfect timing. H-shot, we about to get legendary. Shedeur start the next game, baby. Shout out Dillon though, you know what I'm saying? Bro, I love you, my heart. What am I bigger than cheese, bro? You know what I'm saying? But Shedeur got it.
Shedeur Sanders is a national brand who draws viewers for both performance and result. Dillon Gabriel's attempt to diminish him read as resentment. And Stephen A. Smith called out the insecurity and lack of awareness directly. Colorado under Deion Sanders is prime time, and Shedeur sits at the center of that spotlight. If Gabriel expected the sports world to agree while he took a shot at Shedeur, he misread the moment. Smith dismantled the argument and questioned the credibility behind it. Gabriel will move on. He'll keep playing, give interviews, and have fans, but this exchange will trail his media profile as a reminder of a misstep. It's a clear example of a resume that doesn't justify taking public aim at a quarterback carrying that level of scrutiny and responsibility.
For the Cleveland Browns preseason game today is that the way that some white folks watched Shedeur Sanders last week is the way that some black folks were watching Dillon Gabriel today. And it's not Dillon Gabriel for Dillon Gabriel's sake. Most folks don't have a problem with Dillon Gabriel. It's what he represents, which is the disrespect of a black person for no other apparent reason than they are a confident black person.
Dillon Gabriel thought he was aiming up. Instead, he was placed back among quarterbacks who are good but not great. Stephen A. Smith made the central point. Dillon Gabriel doesn't shape the conversation. Sports are about narrative as much as numbers, and Gabriel's story doesn't move the culture, while Shedeur Sanders does. Smith highlighted that contrast clearly. By the end, Gabriel's credibility had taken a measurable hit. The critique was decisive and sent a broader message to any player considering public shots at Shedeur Sanders. If you step into that debate, you will be held to a higher standard and your resume will be tested. Dillon Gabriel learned that the hard way. The rumors have ended. The decision is public. Cleveland Browns owner Jimmy Haslam has informed every level of the organization that unless an unforeseen injury intervenes, Shedeur Sanders will start at quarterback in week 1. The announcement is not an informal suggestion or a quiet push in the background. It is a direct order. Multiple independent reports, amplified most visibly by Colin Cowherd, confirm that Haslam delivered the directive himself. From the owner's viewpoint, the logic is simple. No one else on the roster offers the same combination of talent, leadership, and long-term upside. Joe Flacco is approaching the twilight of his career. Kenny Pickett has shown flashes but remains inconsistent. Dillon Gabriel, taken in the 3rd round, is a developmental project. By contrast, Haslam believes Sanders can alter the franchise's trajectory immediately, and he refuses to allow internal hesitation to stall that possibility. The standoff traces back to April. General manager Andrew Berry and head coach Kevin Stefanski entered the draft wanting a low-profile prospect who would fit quietly into the existing depth chart. They prioritized scheme familiarity, modest public attention, and a clear developmental timeline. When the board lined up, they reached for Gabriel in round 3, reasoning that an early investment would justify keeping a rookie on ice behind the veterans. But Sanders continued to slide, first through day 2, then deep into round 5. Haslam watched the names come off the board, convinced the league's bias against Deion Sanders' outspoken son was obscuring legitimate first-round talent. When Cleveland's 5th-round pick arrived and Sanders was still available, Haslam intervened. He did more than approve the choice. He overrode the original plan, making it clear that the organization would select Sanders and give him every chance to compete. From that moment on, the Browns' internal narrative splintered into 2 camps: those ready to accelerate around their owner's vision, and those still trying to protect their original approach. Once rookie minicamp began, Sanders erased much of the speculation. He commanded huddles, processed coverages quickly, and delivered throws with anticipation that belied his draft slot. Teammates noted his willingness to accept blame for missed timing, then correct the error without dramatics. While Flacco and Pickett split most first-team reps, Sanders treated limited opportunities as full-speed auditions. During organized team activities, he identified blitz looks, redirected protections, and consistently found his second read when the primary route was covered. More than one defensive veteran told local reporters that Sanders looks like the best arm in the building. That assessment forced Berry and Stefanski to reevaluate their timetable. They could no longer label Sanders a long-term project without contradicting on-field evidence. Drafting Gabriel 2 rounds earlier had provided the staff an excuse to slow roll Sanders' ascent. Coaches could point to investment cost, meeting room familiarity, and installation comfort to justify Gabriel's snap share. Yet each practice rep in which Sanders outperformed the 3rd rounder weakened that shield. Behind closed doors, position coaches began requesting more Sanders film for cut-ups, and offensive assistants quietly shifted meeting questions toward concepts the rookie already executed well. By mid-June, Berry himself started describing Sanders not as a developmental asset, but as a competitive option. Those subtle linguistic changes signal the front office's recognition that the narrative had moved beyond their control. Haslam's history with quarterbacks is well documented. His pushes for Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, and Deshaun Watson were high-visibility swings, each driven in part by a desire to generate excitement as well as wins. Critics highlight those choices to question his evaluation track record, yet Haslam perceives Sanders differently. Where Manziel carried off-field concerns, Sanders brings a reputation for professionalism. Where Mayfield's leadership style divided veterans, Sanders' approach has united receivers and linemen. Where Watson's trade involved unprecedented controversy, Sanders arrived at minimal draft cost. Haslam sees a rare chance to capture star potential without mortgaging the future, and he is unwilling to cede that upside to cautious pacing. Cleveland supporters, weary of revolving door quarterbacks, have rallied around Sanders with unexpected speed. Sales of customized Sanders number 2 jerseys surged within days of rookie minicamp. Training camp ticket requests spiked once local media circulated videos of Sanders making NFL-caliber anticipation throws during 7-on-7 periods. The mood in Northeast Ohio has changed from tentative hope to active belief. Longtime season ticket holders who once shrugged at preseason storylines now debate Sanders' footwork at neighborhood barbecues. Social media engagement for Browns content has climbed, driven by highlight compilations of the rookie threading seam passes between linebackers and safeties. All of this places Kevin Stefanski in a fragile position. If he opens week 1 with a veteran starter and the offense sputters, criticism will be swift. Each stalled drive will be interpreted as evidence that he ignored the owner's edict and the fan base's intuition. Conversely, if he named Sanders the starter solely under pressure, any early struggles could be framed as proof that Sanders was rushed, further exposing Stefanski to blame. The only sustainable solution is conviction. Either stand behind a veteran with clear strategic reasoning or embrace Sanders fully and structure the offense around his strengths. Splitting the difference, rotating series, delaying first-team reps, or using vague competition language will satisfy no one and likely jeopardize locker room clarity. Sanders' personal approach has reinforced Haslam's confidence. Instead of taking post-draft downtime, he traveled to Texas to train in full Browns gear at facilities near his father's home. The leaked clip of Sanders executing footwork drills in helmet and pads wasn't a marketing ploy. It was a glimpse into a quarterback visualizing Week 1 live. Team personnel who viewed the footage recognized purposeful rehearsal, cadence calls, pocket movement against simulated pressure, and follow-through adjustments based on imagined rush lanes. Observers asked why a rookie would conduct such intense solo sessions in May. The answer is straightforward. Sanders does not view himself as a developmental pick. He considers himself the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns and prepares accordingly. On pure ability, Sanders' arm strength ranks with the league average for starters. His accuracy to the intermediate middle, an area where the Browns' current scheme generates high leverage completions, has drawn consistent praise from receivers. The primary areas still under review are blitz recognition and live bullets and timing on deep outbreaking routes versus press coverage. Those developmental checkpoints are significant, yet daily practice reps show acceleration. In contrast, Flacco's mobility limits the boot action game that Stefanski installed to help Mayfield early in his tenure. Pickett can extend plays, but struggles to attack tight windows between linebackers and safeties, an essential requirement in Cleveland schematics. Gabriel remains an unknown at NFL speed. Thus, the competitive landscape favors Sanders sooner than the coaching staff originally planned. The franchise now stands at an inflection point. Haslam's mandate, the locker room's growing support, and the fan base's enthusiasm all tilt towards Sanders. The front office's earlier strategy, anchored in patience and quiet development, is increasingly untenable. Barry's shift in messaging indicates grudging alignment, but final authority over the depth chart rests with the coaching staff, unless ownership directly intervenes on game day decisions. A move rare but not unprecedented in the NFL. Should Stefanski align with the owner and name Sanders the starter before preseason concludes, he can claim proactive vision and tailor the offense through training camp. Should he resist and open with a veteran who falters, he risks rapid loss of credibility and possibly his position. Either path carries pressure, but only one aligns with the momentum sweeping through the building. For 2 decades, the Browns have cycled quarterbacks without securing a stable star. Each new hope, whether draft pick or trade acquisition, has collapsed under injuries, inconsistency, or organizational disarray. The possibility that Sanders could finally anchor the position is not merely a football storyline. It is a potential cultural reset for a fan base defined by resilience. Haslam's insistence reflects that awareness. Cleveland needs a leader who can win on Sundays and project confidence every other day of the week. Sanders has shown he can shoulder expectations without retreating from scrutiny. That trait, more than arm talent alone, is why the owner views him as indispensable. Voluntary workouts transition to mandatory minicamp next week. If Sanders receives a substantial share of first-team snaps, observers will interpret it as the staff's acknowledgement that the competition is tilting decisively. A public declaration may not follow immediately, but every rep allocation is a signal. If, however, the staff continues funneling most top unit snaps to Flacco or Pickett, tension will escalate. Local media will question the evaluation process. National analysts will debate the merits of letting a rookie learn through live action versus controlled practice. Inside the facility, players will recognize any disconnect between performance and opportunity, and unity could fray. The Browns have reached a decisive moment. Shedeur Sanders has demonstrated the skill, poise, and work ethic to justify starting in Week 1. Jimmy Haslam has publicly positioned him as the future, and by implication the present of the franchise. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Barry must either endorse that vision or brace for the consequences of delaying it. For Cleveland fans, the significance is clear. A legitimate chance to exit the cycle of quarterback uncertainty and rally behind a signal caller capable of commanding the field and galvanizing the city. Whether that opportunity is seized promptly or postponed will define the Browns' 2025 season and likely the tenure of the decision makers involved. They have never loathed college football itself. They have resisted the people determined to reshape it. When Deion Sanders, black, direct, unapologetic, walks into a room of power brokers and speaks with authority instead of deference, critics recoil. During his playing days, they complained about celebrations and gold chains. Now that he is a head coach, mentor, and father, they label him something more polite, but just as dismissive, a problem. At Big 12 Media Days, Sanders addressed the accelerating chaos of the name, image, likeness market. He said college football needs a salary cap, not to hobble players, but to impose order on a system that showers unproven freshmen with seven-figure promises while the rest of a roster hunts for scraps. He called the situation unsustainable. Within hours, ESPN commentator Paul Feinbaum branded him a hypocrite, arguing that Sanders profited from NIL at Jackson State and now wants rules only because his most marketable athletes have moved on. The accusation spread quickly because it fit a comfortable storyline. Outspoken black coach gains from change, then protests when the advantage disappears. That framing ignores context. Sanders never criticized players earning money. At Jackson State, he urged corporate sponsors to partner with athletes who had been invisible to major brands for decades. What he wants now is stability, standardized guidelines, basic financial literacy, and roster balance that prevents locker rooms from fracturing over uneven payouts. When other coaches, Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Lane Kiffin, voiced similar concerns, they were praised for foresight. When Sanders spoke, the tone shifted to suspicion. The difference is not the message, it is the messenger. Feinbaum's response followed a familiar script. When black leaders question the structure of the sport, their motives are interrogated, their credibility attacked, and their competence doubted. He did not level the same charge at Jimbo Fisher when Fisher complained that NIL disturbed recruiting. He stayed silent when Kiffin lamented the transfer portal. But Sanders, who raised enrollment and television ratings at Jackson State, brought unprecedented attention to Colorado in one season and consistently mentors players beyond football, was called opportunistic. Feinbaum dismissed the cultural impact Sanders created, the exposure for historically black colleges, the draft pick developed, the infrastructure improved, reducing his work to a marketing stunt dependent on star sons Shedeur and Shiloh or two-way standout Travis Hunter. Sanders did not retaliate. He returned to practice, media obligations, and recruiting. His confidence is rooted in faith and in the responsibility he feels toward young athletes whose lives will extend decades beyond their highlight clips. When he asks for NIL boundaries, he is thinking about freshmen handed large sums without guidance, families unprepared for sudden wealth, and programs that abandon kids once production stalls. He has watched that cycle from the inside. He wants protections, not restrictions. Critics predicted Colorado would fade once Shedeur and Hunter leave. Instead, Sanders signed blue-chip quarterback G.J. Lewis and a wave of transfers eager to join a program that values personal growth as much as on-field wins. Recruits see a coach who challenges the status quo, who places black culture at the program's center without apology, and who will remain visible when social media buzz cools. They recognize that Sanders does not chase attention. Attention follows his results. Media outlets reduced the upcoming Buffaloes season to a win total prop. 6 victories, give or take. Sanders is playing a longer game. He wants to show young athletes, especially black athletes, that they can lead authentically, speak with conviction, and refuse to shrink for access. Success measured only by the scoreboard misses the point. If Sanders builds men who graduate with financial literacy, self-confidence, and community awareness, he will consider the mission successful, even if Colorado finishes with 5 wins instead of 10. None of that registers with commentators invested in an older hierarchy. For them, leadership should remain predictable, reserved posture, muted tone, minimal cultural expression. Sanders contradicts that image. The possibility that his methods could spread to other coaches, to other programs, threatens a model that has kept decision-making and revenue streams concentrated for generations. So the debate is not about hypocrisy or payroll ceilings. It is about control of the narrative and who is deemed qualified to write it. Sanders refuses to surrender that authority. He knows order is necessary. He also knows whose voices have been ignored whenever real reform is discussed. By speaking plainly, he forces television panels, athletic directors, and conference commissioners to confront issues they would rather defer: financial education, equitable resource distribution, and consistent national standards. Whether Colorado exceeds betting lines this fall will not change the trajectory Sanders has already set. He made Boulder relevant, energized recruiting beyond traditional power corridors, and broadened college football's cultural reach. that influence will persist long after social media debates cool. If his call for NIL structure eventually becomes policy, as the NCAA and Congress now contemplate, Feinbaum's soundbite will fade while Sanders' imprint endures. In the end, accusations of hypocrisy say more about the accuser than the coach. Sanders has remained consistent: empower athletes, hold adults accountable, and inject stability before unchecked money corrodes the locker room. The people who stand to lose clout in that environment prefer the chaos they can manipulate. Sanders prefers a system that nurtures the players who make the sport worth watching. His advocacy is rooted in experience, not self-interest, and his critics will have to decide whether to engage with that reality or keep shouting from the sidelines.
Shedeur Sanders did not treat day 4 of Brown's training camp as anything other than work. He completed 8 of 11 passes with 3 touchdowns, operating with control and accuracy throughout the red zone periods. The throws were varied: a well-placed ball to rookie Luke Floria that led him across the goal line in stride, a firm throw to Cade McDonald over middle after a quick read, and a tight window completion to Deontay Johnson at the back of the end zone with 2 defenders closing. The sequence showed timing, poise, and placement under pressure. While national attention centered on Joe Flacco's underneath completions and Kenny Pickett's option and rollout periods, Sanders produced scoring plays on schedule. The performance was not the product of broken coverages or end-of-period reps. It came within structured work, with defenders in position and the offense executing standard progressions. The accuracy rate, 8 completions on 11 attempts, reflected consistent mechanics and decisions. The operation was steady from huddle to snap to finish. Despite that session, the distribution of first-team snaps did not change. Camp logs indicated that Pickett and Dillon Gabriel continued rotating with the starters, while Sanders remained primarily with the second unit. With the first preseason game approaching, that choice drew more attention from observers who expected productive days to be followed by expanded opportunities. The question surfaced again: what additional evidence is required to evaluate Sanders with the top group? The 3 touchdowns illustrated different aspects of his profile. On the throw to Floria, Sanders used a measured trajectory to lead the receiver away from contact and into the end zone. On the ball to Johnson, he identified leverage, held the safety with his shoulders, and delivered to a precise spot at the back line. On the throw to McDonald, he eliminated the first read, reset, and drove the ball into the window before the hook defender could squeeze it. Each score reflected a particular tool: anticipation, manipulation, and velocity within standard timing. Comparisons to the other quarterbacks were straightforward. Pickett produced 2 touchdowns but placed 1 late ball that exposed a receiver to contact near the goal line. Gabriel accounted for 1 score, with additional gains coming on checkdowns and designed movement. Flacco advanced the ball in short increments without finishing drives during the same period. Sanders converted opportunities into points repeatedly and without turnovers. The rotation, however, remained unchanged. Head coach Kevin Stefanski and the staff continued to allocate first-team work to the same group, describing the process as an open evaluation. In practice, that has meant extended starter reps for Pickett and Gabriel, veteran scripts for Flacco, and second unit periods for Sanders. The disconnect between output and opportunity was notable, particularly given the stated goal of reaching an early decision at quarterback. When asked about the timeline recently, Stefanski said the preference was to decide sooner rather than later, an acknowledgement that the window for assessment is limited as preseason approaches. Speculation about motives is common in such situations. The discussion has included references to front office perspectives and ownership influence. Owner Jimmy Haslam is widely viewed as supportive of drafting Sanders. General manager Andrew Berry is known for prioritizing fit, traits, and process within the roster building model. Stefanski reports to Berry, and the practice plan reflects coaching evaluation within organizational parameters. None of that guarantees any outcome. It does explain why rotations can remain conservative even after strong individual periods. Regardless of internal views, the most useful next step for the evaluation would be a defined set of first-team snaps for Sanders to put comparable tape next to his peers. There was also outside attention on several practice segments from earlier in camp that showed Sanders throwing during lulls to non-receiver personnel, ball attendants, staffers, and assistants. While other quarterbacks were in script with full units. Those clips circulated widely and were interpreted by some as dismissive. Sanders addressed questions about it by narrowing the focus to preparation, explaining that his responsibility is to be ready for the work assigned and that he has adjusted at every level of competition, from HBCU ball to the Power 5 and now the NFL. The response matched his general approach: acknowledge the situation, maintain routine, and continue to execute when the next period begins. The broader draft day and narrative context remains part of the conversation. Sanders' college resume included efficient production and high completion rates across 2 programs, culminating in national recognition such as the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award. His selection in the 5th round was driven by varying evaluations of projection, scheme fit, and development timelines. The result is the current environment. He must present his case within limited windows, then wait for access to the next rung of competition. That does not make the process unfair, it makes it exacting. The best answer, for him and for the staff, is additional, comparable reps and clear tape. Fan reaction after day 4 was direct. Social accounts and comment threads filled with assessments that centered on performance rather than reputation. Sanders produced 3 touchdowns, avoided negative plays, and showed command in the red zone. Supporters pointed to that tape and asked for opportunities with the starters to verify whether the same rhythm carries over with the top receivers and linemen. The message was not about headlines. It was about the logic of evaluation in a compressed calendar. From an operational standpoint, Sanders' day reflected consistent fundamentals. His base was disciplined, his eyes matched his feet, and his timing aligned with route depths. On the Johnson score, he used a subtle shoulder turn to hold the safety before resetting and throwing to the back line. On the McDonald throw, the ball was out on the second hitch, arriving before the defenders could converge. On the Floria play, the arc and placement minimized the hit risk and maximized the run-through. Those are portable traits. They translate across units if the timing with receivers is established through reps. The staff's balancing act is real. They must prepare the presumed week 1 starter with sufficient continuity while also giving developmental players enough exposure to judge ceiling and floor. That tension is present in every camp. The cleanest path through it is to carve out defined first-team sequences for each competitor and evaluate the tape against comparable defenses and situations: high red zone, low red zone, 3rd and medium, and 2-minute. Sanders' performance on day 4 strengthened the case for such an allocation. Context matters off the field as well. Earlier in the offseason, 2 speeding citations, 91 miles per hour in Brunswick and 101 miles per hour in Strongsville, prompted public comment from Barry, who emphasized standards and safety. Sanders accepted responsibility, stated that he learned from the incidents and moved on. In camp, he has kept the focus on football tasks, install retention, cadence management, protection IDs, and post-practice review. He has also continued to build rapport across position groups, including veteran receivers and defensive backs, so that timing and expectations are clear when reps arrive. None of this diminishes the experience of the veterans in the room. Flacco has decades of film, Pickett has multiple seasons of NFL starts, and Gabriel brings mobility and a defined collegiate profile. It does, however, underscore the purpose of camp, to align decisions with current performance. Sanders produced the most efficient scoring period of the day. The next logical step is to see that operation with the starting unit, document the results, and compare them to the other candidates under the same conditions. The preseason opener will compress timelines further. Install packages expand, and coaches begin to narrow personnel groupings. If the objective is to identify the quarterback who can operate the offense most cleanly on Sundays, then structured exposure now will give the staff better information later. A small but deliberate set of first-team snaps for Sanders, scripted early downs, a 3rd down sequence, and a red zone series would provide data without disrupting broader preparation. Until that occurs, Sanders can only continue to control process and execution. Day 4 showed what that looks like when opportunities align: efficient reads, disciplined mechanics, and finishes in the end zone. He did not seek attention for the sequence. He put it on tape. If the evaluation remains consistent with the stated competition, comparable snaps should follow. If they do, the staff will have a clear side-by-side measure. If they do not, the question from observers will remain the same: what more needs to be seen to justify the look? For now, the record from day 4 is clear. 8 completions on 11 attempts, 3 touchdowns, no turnovers, red zone precision, consistent control at the line and in the pocket. Those are tangible outputs. They merit a defined opportunity with the starters as the team moves toward preseason and the decision that follows. Whether or not that opportunity arrives immediately, Sanders has shown the preparation and execution necessary to be evaluated on equal footing. The next step is a matter of allocation, not speculation.
Rich Eisen addressed the armchair analysts and online critics head-on. Shedeur Sanders just received his opportunity, and the backlash arrived immediately. Eisen responded with a clear, point-by-point case explaining why the criticism misses the mark. If you thought Shedeur's rise was rapid, Eisen's analysis puts it in proper context. Here's what he laid out on air.
Already speaking in Cleveland high schools.
Weekend after, flying out immediately to get to work.
But his character's terrible, right? You know, and listen, oh, he interviewed bad, you know. According to who? The New York Giants? No offense, Bert. The same New York Giants that gave Daniel Jones a huge contract and let Saquon Barkley out the door. That's the intel we're trusting here?
That was for him to celebrate. He just made, I mean, look, he put in work in college. He had the privilege of being coached by his father.
Which we all would love and choose.
Turned around not 1, but 2 programs in college football. And then literally for any athlete, being drafted at the highest level is a success story in itself.
Rich Eisen delivered a direct response to the critics. He addressed the online claims reducing Shedeur Sanders to Deion Sanders' son instead of evaluating him as a quarterback on merit. Eisen challenged those assumptions and refocused the discussion on performance, preparation, and opportunity.
Say Kenny Pickett had strained his hamstring. Shedeur, they say his first day in pass, 9 for 9, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Really was just hating on this young guy.
Within minutes, Rich Eisen delivered a structured breakdown, addressing each claim with evidence and dismantling weak narratives through clear analysis. He replaced speculation with data and kept the focus on what matters: decision-making, accuracy, leadership, preparation, and game management. The reality is simple. Shedeur Sanders was not given this opportunity. He earned it through performance and consistency against real competition. He accepted the role, met the standard, and handled the moment with professionalism and urgency. No shortcuts, no favors, just results and readiness. Eisen's point was direct. Evaluate Shedeur on his work, not assumptions, and acknowledge that he has justified the opportunity on the field.
I've done it at 2 locations already, so it's simple. So that's why when people say I'm not, you know, one of the top quarterbacks or the top quarterback, is what are y'all going based off of? Because I did it year after year after year, and you see the progression. So it's like, obviously it got to be some type of external hate that you have for the family, for the last name, for anything. Because I know I proved myself.
While many were still debating whether he was NFL ready, Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the practice field and operated like a clear QB1, setting protections, controlling tempo, and executing the plan. The narrative that he is just flash, media attention, or his father's influence does not hold up against his work in installs, progressions, and situational drills. What he showed was composure, efficiency, and command of the offense. He processed quickly, protected the football, and delivered on-time throws, demonstrating preparation and control.
I'm a firm believer. If I wanted Shedeur Sanders at 2, at worst at 33, of course I already think that he's better than the other quarterbacks. Because that's the type of talent, that's where I would have picked him at. And if he was at 2 or 33, and he still had this same exact skill set, we would be talking about him starting and playing.
Right. Well, there'd only be 3 quarterbacks.
It'd be 3 quarterbacks, not 4.
Not 4, yeah.
But since he moved to the 5th round, that's cool. They might have to go along with it. But to me, I think if you ask who got the best tools, I'm going with Shedeur Sanders.
From the first day of camp, he was not there to get by. He arrived to lead. There was no hesitation in installs, no lapses in fundamentals, just precise timing, clean footwork, and consistent velocity to every level of the field. He managed protections, controlled cadence, and delivered in situational work, showing command rather than learning on the fly. The approach was efficient and disciplined, with attention to detail and progressions and ball placement that reflected preparation, not improvisation. At the same time, Rich Eisen addressed the narrative directly and backed it with evidence. He laid out clips, context, and performance markers to cut through speculation. Eisen emphasized that Shedeur Sanders did not step into this moment because of publicity. He built toward it through sustained work, resilience, and results. The background, media readiness, high football IQ, and a professional approach was developed over years, not days, and it translated to immediate operational control of the offense. The resistance came from familiar places. Some in the traditional guard still framed mobile quarterbacks as limited and expected the nepotism label to define him. That view did not not hold up against what was on the field. Composure under pressure, secure decision-making, accurate throws into tight windows, and consistent execution in red zone and 2-minute sequences. Eisen's point was clear. Evaluate Shedeur Sanders on performance and readiness. The evidence shows he earned the opportunity and is meeting the standard with accountability and consistency.
Yeah, teams didn't draft him because they didn't think he was first-round talent. And the quote we played and that's on the screen, I think is flatly wrong. We all know this shouldn't have happened. Yes, it should have. It should have happened because this wasn't. Now, again, teams can be wrong. The league as a whole can be wrong. Hell, the Baltimore Ravens drafted a 25-year-old tight end before they drafted Lamar Jackson in the same draft. The die is not cast on who Shedeur Sanders.
He stated it plainly. This is not a celebrity appearance. This is a quarterback with pocket presence, leadership, and decision-making that stands on its own. You either show it or you settle into a backup role. Shedeur Sanders is not auditioning. He is establishing himself as the starter. When the opportunity arrived, whether through injury, trade, or depth chart changes, Shedeur was prepared and delivered. He did not hesitate. He executed the offense and finished drives. As others tried to catch up to what they were seeing, Rich Eisen reinforced the same message he has been repeating. Evaluate the work. Camp reports have been consistently positive, but the important shift is how the performance is being received. Casual attendees who came to observe left talking about Shedeur's command and poise. Detailed observers focused on his pre-snap reads, protection checks, and audibles, highlighting the mechanics, timing, and ball placement that support efficient, controlled play.
Honestly, guys notice it more when you're out winning games, right? If Cleveland starts off in a bad start, they're not doing well, and all of a sudden Shedeur or Dillon Gabriel are doing well in 7-on-7. They're throwing dimes. In practice drills, the number one defense can't stop them. People take notice of that. And the more that the players see it, then the comments start happening over the lunch table. They start happening throughout the building, and that's when the pressure really will get severe.
The Cleveland Browns were focused on resolving their quarterback situation until Jason Kelce made pointed comments that triggered a strong reaction from ownership. The response inside the organization was immediate and intense. What exactly did Kelce say that has the dog pound on edge and the front office under pressure?
We've seen that miserable game by the Cleveland Browns. So they throw Joe Flacco in there, and I like Joe Flacco. He did good, but they gave him the resource of all the first-team guys. Then they throw Dillon Gabriel in there with first teams and second teams. So Dillon always is getting protected. The same thing again, they gave this scrub max protection on every play. Yeah, he completed some passes, but let's talk about his mistakes. He's still inconsistent with his throws, but he at least had max protection.
The Cleveland Browns continue to be defined by inconsistency and avoidable setbacks. Even as fans hoped the organization had turned a corner, Jason Kelce, fresh off retirement, offered a direct critique that reignited doubts about the team's direction. His remarks implied the franchise's structure and decision-making remain unstable and recent progress may not hold. The takeaway for leadership is straightforward. Identify core issues, align on a coherent plan, and execute with discipline. For supporters, it's another sign that the problems run deeper than a single season.
They throw Shedeur Sanders in there with the lowest cab drivers you couldn't even get on 5th Street. And I'm pissed off, bro, because the play calling was abysmal. Look, even if you don't like Shedeur didn't even get a chance to be trash. Even if you think Shedeur is garbage, he didn't even get a chance to be garbage. That's how awful the offensive line was. Kevin Stefanski still doesn't want to give Shedeur second strings and first strings reps. Why is that?
Browns ownership's response shifted from measured to urgent. The pattern is familiar in Cleveland. The team once treated Johnny Manziel as a franchise solution, retained Hugh Jackson for a second year despite results, and invested heavily in Deshaun Watson through a costly trade and contract. These decisions reflect aggressive but poorly aligned planning. The outcome has been continued instability instead of sustained progress.
That this was the guy that they wanted to start. He's seasoned, he's experienced, he still has a big-time arm, even at his age, and they open with the Cincinnati Bengals. They wanted that experienced guy. He was always going to be the guy. They were not going to start Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders in week 1. Kenny Pickett had a hamstring injury. It makes it easy to go with Joe Flacco. And the question isn't and wasn't going to be who's the starter in Cleveland. The question is who's going to be the backup in Cleveland? Who's going to be the number 2 quarterback when they open the season against these Bengals.
Fans still show up season after season, expecting improvement and bracing for setbacks. The usual pattern has been early optimism followed by a gradual collapse. But last season was different. For a sustained stretch, the Browns looked organized and competitive, resembling a functioning team.
Couple days, 3 days until roster cutdowns. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you belong here on this team?
Obviously, I think overall as a player, I feel like I put in the work. I feel like everything I do, I try to do it to my best, and that's all I ask for. So I feel like everybody feels like, they should be on the team, and if you ask anybody on the team, would they feel like they belong, in their own eyes. So I feel like I do, but I'm my own player, I think about myself in a high regard.
The front office entered the offseason confident. Kevin Stefanski was being praised, and the Dog Pound believed the team had made real progress. Then Jason Kelce delivered a pointed assessment that cut through the optimism. Fresh into retirement, the former Eagles All-Pro and Super Bowl champion said Cleveland still looks like a team patching over issues rather than building a durable contender. Kelce's view was direct. The Browns' structure is fragile, and the roster is too dependent on perfect health at quarterback. He argued the team is one injury away from losing continuity and sliding backward. Because Kelce has operated inside a stable, championship-level organization, his comments carried weight with players, media, and fans. The reaction was immediate. People took his critique seriously, not as outside noise, but as an informed evaluation of how a successful team should be built. Ownership also felt the impact. Jimmy Haslam's response shifted to urgency, a sign that leadership recognizes the stakes. The criticism arrives in the context of prior high-risk decisions, especially the fully guaranteed $230 million commitment tied to Deshaun Watson. Watson has missed time and shown inconsistency when available, and the contract has constrained flexibility. Kelce's remarks highlight why depth, alignment between the front office and coaching staff, and a clear contingency plan at quarterback are non-negotiable. The takeaway is straightforward. Cleveland must convert last season's progress into a stable framework, protect the quarterback, deepen critical positions, and establish a plan that survives injuries and short-term setbacks. Without that, the games that fueled optimism will remain temporary.
If you're a betting man, who do you think starts for the Browns at quarterback?
Okay, this is the situation. Kenny Pickett, they actually traded for him. Joe Flacco, no one's bringing Joe Flacco in the building thinking Joe Flacco's going to be the starter. If Joe Flacco is your starter,
you got a problem.
You have a huge problem. And if they were saying Shedeur was the starter as the 5th rounder, you got a real problem too, because he passed over all these guys in these reps in the offseason in shorts, in bikini shorts, Speedos and stuff. Like, no. That kind of stuff. So I'm not that surprised. When you put down a 3rd round pick on a quarterback, you do believe he has a certain skill set.
Jason Kelce stated the obvious. Cleveland committed to a quarterback who hasn't played at an elite level in years, and Joe Flacco's playoff run didn't change the long-term outlook. Ownership appeared more upset that the criticism was public than by the substance of the critique. Many fans agreed. They've seen this pattern before. Rosters age, injuries are inevitable, and when a single contract dominates the cap, one setback at quarterback can undermine the entire season. Kelce's broader point was about structure. The Browns prioritized the high-cost, uncertain starter over depth and contingency. The late-season surge masked issues that remain: limited cap flexibility, thin depth at key positions, and an offense that lacks a credible Plan B. Fans recognize how quickly a strong defense can decline with injuries, and how an offense without redundancy stalls. The AFC North raises the stakes. Baltimore with Lamar Jackson sustains a top standard. Cincinnati with Joe Burrow returns to contention when healthy. Pittsburgh rarely slips below .500 under Mike Tomlin and wins with defense and consistency. In that environment, Cleveland can't rely on perfect health or peak form from one player. The path forward is clear. Diversify cap allocation, reinforce the offensive line and receiver depth, carry a legitimate backup plan at quarterback, and install a scheme that functions regardless of who is under center.
Given what we saw yesterday with Shedeur Sanders, somebody on the Cleveland Browns is 100% getting fired, probably by the end of this year.
The person who's probably going to end up getting fired is Kevin Stefanski, because I know that he didn't want Shedeur Sanders on the team. It was Andrew Berry who made that pick. You can't really go against your GM. Bad things happen in this situation. But Shedeur Sanders is not without fault for what we saw yesterday. This is the play that we saw yesterday that has the internet just exploding, where Shedeur Sanders took like a 24-yard sack. Half of the internet is saying that this is all Kevin Stefanski's fault.
Cleveland showed progress last season, but the underlying concerns remain. Jason Kelce highlighted them directly. The Browns' long-term plan is fragile, cap-constrained, and overly dependent on perfect health at quarterback. His comments focused attention on structural issues, roster depth, continuity in coaching, and a sustainable offensive approach, rather than a single hot streak. That criticism resonated because it reflected what many around the league already see. Ownership's reaction underscored the sensitivity. Jimmy Haslam has presided over frequent coaching and quarterback changes, and external scrutiny carries weight when it comes from a respected veteran with championship experience. Kelce's remarks reinforce that last year's Joe Flacco stretch was a short-term solution, not a foundation. The team still needs a durable plan that can withstand injuries and inconsistency. The practical takeaway is clear: stabilize the system, diversify cap usage, and build depth at key positions so the offense functions regardless of who is under center. That includes a coherent development pathway for younger talent such as Shedeur Sanders, with defined practice reps, protection, and scheme alignment. Kelce didn't say anything outrageous. He articulated the gap between a brief surge and a credible long-term contender.
I have the faith of a mustard seed. Right, because this is the greatest resurrection since Jesus the Christ. Right, like at some point, Joe Flacco was thinking about getting into TV.
Yeah.
Right, Joe Flacco didn't have a job, and then now you not only come back and start for the Cleveland Browns late in the 2023 season, but they came back around to you. You're now the day one starter for a franchise that just 2 years ago was in the playoffs.
The Browns' quarterback situation remains unsettled. Deshaun Watson was expected to be the long-term answer, but injuries and inconsistent play have prevented him from reaching an elite level. When the team turned to Joe Flacco after Watson's season deteriorated, Flacco immediately lifted the offense and produced results that highlighted the gap between expectations and reality. That a 39-year-old late addition could outperform a $230 million starter was not just a short-term surprise, it raised fundamental questions about roster construction and evaluation. Quarterback depth has been fragile, and the late-season surge masked broader structural problems. Jason Kelce's remarks made that clear. Cleveland is vulnerable if the starter is unavailable, cap flexibility is limited, and the offensive plan lacks a stable contingency. His critique drew attention to leadership and planning as much as on-field performance. Jimmy Haslam's strong reaction reflects the pressure on ownership. The organization has promoted a message of stability and progress, but Kelce's assessment suggested those gains are not yet durable. The path forward requires a realistic approach to the cap, a credible backup plan at quarterback, and a system that holds up regardless of personnel.